temple's not built yet. The tabernacle is that still in Gibeah, if I remember right, or Shiloh? It's in Shiloh. And so the tabernacle's over in Shiloh. David's going to bring that to Jerusalem eventually. So it's not set up like we think of Israel at this time. It's still a lot of wild country. There's still Canaanites in the area, and Jebusites, and Perizzites, and some of the others. So there's things happening, but David is now this king, and Saul's been king. The Philistines are a problem, and David's king over one part. Now, how does this fit? Where is this in our typology? Our pictures of Christ. Is it a small type, a big type? Is this where we sit today in Christianity? Jesus Christ, kind of on a throne, but not. Over top of his little flock, but not over top of all. You know, it's kind of hard sometimes to put it in. So as we go through this, you remember, the typologies, the pictures are what you're searching for, right? The rest of the story is cool, right? And it's just to know your Bible's neat. But the pictures of Christ and his kingdom, who he is, his message, his coming, that's what you're looking for. I try to throw out these little nuggets all the time to keep your mind awake. I think today is a great picture of tares. Because as we read chapter 3, it's awfully difficult to understand why and what's happening. Why are these men vicious men, killers, murderers, allowed in this political arena under David? The representation of Christ, really, Christ can be called his son. In pictures, he's God's going to sit on David's throne, for goodness sake. And there's no better picture that we can find of David. This is Christ in his throne, but conquering and fighting. Now, like the scapegoat we were studying last night, there's two goats in this sacrifice. One is killed, one is let go. But the one goat has to be in the presence of the other goat while it's being killed. Because in typology, they're one goat. It's one sacrifice. They're both Jesus Christ. They're both a picture of what he does to our sins. And they're one picture. But because you can't take a dead goat and set it free, it never runs very far. And so they have to take a living goat, set it next to the dead goat. When the dead goat dies, they take the living goat and they set it free. It's the same goat in picture. Well, the same thing happens in typology. Solomon is the picture of Jesus Christ, and David's the picture of Jesus Christ. Solomon's the picture of the millennial reign of Christ. David's the picture of what? Now. David has blood on his hands, is a warrior, and has to conquer. Solomon steps in as the most glorious, the most exalted king, amazing in beauty, stunning to go see. So when we get this picture of what we're picturing, what are we seeing here? Well, this what we see. We try to say, why is Joab alive at the end of chapter 3? Why doesn't David kill him? Well, what does Jesus say about the tares? He says, leave the tares, lest you hurt the wheat. And this is one of the oddest things. It's the hardest thing. Why did God allow Joseph Smith to live? Why did God allow Taz Russell to live? Why didn't he just kill him? And the Jehovah's Witnesses would never exist. There'd be no cult deceiving, 7 million or 14 million people on earth today? Why? Why does God allow Muhammad to do what he did if he existed? That's a big question mark right now. It's pretty interesting to see some of the latest scholarly work. Why? Why does God allow a person to come in and split a church? Why does God allow a gossip to do what they do? And why does God allow these things to take place? Why doesn't God intervene? Well, he does at times, right? When does God intervene? Well, most often when God's people don't worship correctly. Some are weak, some sick, some are dead. God intervened. You want him to intervene? How many of you are glad that God doesn't intervene? so often, right? Right? And because God intervened, if God do something about that sin, God says, okay, I'm going to start with you. No, do something about bad sin. Okay, which sin is not bad? For me, it's do something when God's people are being hurt. It kills a pastor to see somebody come into the church and rip his flock up. And to see some people in his church getting hurt by something. And it kills you. You're like, God, do something. God does. But he never does it quite like we want, huh? Right? It's supposed to be... and God does it differently. Why does he put up? How does David's kingdom, which he's trying to establish in righteousness, how do you reconcile the Psalms, which David wrote, with David's actual kingdom, which had some vile men in it? And David ruled them. Well, David had an ability to rule vile men, which is amazing. Let's look at chapter 3. Now, as we step into chapter 3, there's always application, because any sermon without application, what's the verse? It's 2 Samuel chapter 3. Ephesians, or is it Galatians chapter 5? The flesh lusts against the spirit against the flesh. I said 5. Galatians or Ephesians? Galatians. Okay, it's Galatians. I always get those two messed up. And did you say Galatians first time? You just said 5, didn't you? Okay, thanks. I think Matthew said Galatians. You said 5, made a great team. Did you say Galatians? No, you didn't? Okay, I thought somebody did. So Galatians chapter 5, the Bible says, the flesh lusteth against the spirit against the flesh. They're contrary one to another. So you cannot do the things that you would. The flesh is represented oftentimes in our Bible, most often by the Philistines in the Old Testament. They just keep coming up and coming up and coming up. They never go away. You beat them, you whoop them, you put them down, and what happens? And the Philistines gather together and for war and attack. They always come back. Why can't you just wipe out the Philistines and be done? Because they represent the flesh. You're never going to get over this. Okay? You're never going to conquer your flesh completely. All right? It's just not going to happen. You'll have moments of great victory, and it just seems like that thing just comes up and troubles you again later. And why? Because you're going to fight the Philistines all your life. All right? But the Philistines has a few giants, and you're going to be able to put them down. and that's always the thing. In the end, guess what? God takes out the Philistines. We also have a picture here of a war between two families, two dynasties. The Saul dynasty represents the flesh. He was chosen by Israel. David's dynasty represents the spirit. And you see here, the aggressor was Abner. The flesh wars against the spirit. So you can take this as a personal application here and see the battle. Because what do you see in chapter 3, verse number 1? It says, now there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. Well, yeah, no kidding. There was a long war. The two houses, and I wrote this in my Bible, says these two houses exist in the heart of every believer. There's a long war. Amen. There's a long war. But I got good news for you. If you stay in the battle, means you don't surrender. Raise the white flag. Don't raise the white flag to the house of Saul. If you stay in the battle, what happens? Finish the verse. The house of Saul waxed what? Weaker and weaker. There's a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, but David waxed stronger and stronger. The house of Saul waxed weaker and weaker. And that's what the Christian life is supposed to be. Okay? Once you get saved, that battle now enrages. I heard a man the other day, he said it a little bit wrong, but he kind of smiled when he said it. He says, in some way I was better off before I got saved. And he actually said, I was better off before I got saved. He says, well, in some way. He says, because the battle didn't exist before then, and now it does. And it's true. But if you stay in the faith and you stay in your scriptures, you learn the word of God, and you don't quench the spirit or grieve the spirit, as you guys were talking today, then you can wax stronger and stronger in spirit and in the spirit faith. And those that are spiritually minded, the Bible says, is life. But they that are carnally minded, this is Christians, it's death. Life and peace come from the spiritual mind, right? The spiritual mind. What Matthew was preaching today, right? Turn your eyes upon the Lord. Get that spiritual mindset. Where are your sins? They're as far as the east is from the west. And when you're counting on that spiritual mindedness and minding the things of the Spirit, you get victory. And it waxes stronger and stronger. And then the flesh, the other side, can wax weaker and weaker. These two houses are in every man's heart. All right? These two houses have champions. But the houses aren't pure. They're not clean. Let's jump into the text here and look at a few things. Because David does something that nobody condones. What's that? He multiplies to himself wives. What does that say? Oh, all right. I don't like those thick pens. You can't read it when you write. It looks like a big blob. Notice this verse. I want you to look at this. There's a sister verses in the Bible, and you know one of the sister verses is draw nigh to God. He'll draw nigh to you. Now we've done that example many a times, right? What does that do? It cuts the difference quickly, right? Do we need to do it again? What's the example? A couple of you know it. All right, Joe, go over there. Now, people on camera can't see it, but I'll come over here. Now, if I go to Joe, how many steps is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's 10 steps to Joe. And you're like, wow, that's a lot of effort. Yes, but that's God, and I'm trying to get to God. If I turn and make an effort towards the Lord, I draw nigh to Him, what's He do? He draws nigh to me. So now it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The distance closes fast. Why? Especially when it's God. He can take bigger steps than Joe. Thanks, brother. And so if you draw nigh to God, He'll draw nigh to you. That closes the gap very quickly. Now, if I'm gaining in strength, and so say, me and Matt were arm wrestling, and man, I can't put him down, so I start working out. Right? And I'm practicing arm wrestling, and I'm going to Steve's house, and I'm practicing with Steve, and notice I was losing every time, and I'm starting to get to arm wrestle, then I go to Mike Weilman, that profession, he's training me how to arm wrestle, and I'm getting stronger and stronger, right? Well, now my chances of beating Matt would be much better, right? Because I'm getting stronger. But what if at the same time he's getting weaker? Right? What if all of a sudden he catches some nasty GI thing like I had the last 2 days, but it lasts for 3 months with him? And his body starts eating all his own protein. And Matt comes back and he's like 96 pounds. He's like, I could use a little of that, right? And his arm's like as big as my wrist, his bicep. All right? And he's like, oh man, I'm so weak. I'm like, I got this. And I've been practicing with Steve, right? Man, I could beat him now. Well, notice what happens in this verse. One grows stronger, but at the same time, the other grows weaker. Making the difference between the two gain much faster. Your victory over the flesh is that way. It can get weaker as you get stronger. And this is what we see is this is a multiplying kind of factor verse where God shows where the enemy gets weaker at the same time you get stronger. And this is what God does for us is as you gain strength, He doesn't just let you gain strength, He actually will weaken the enemy. And what does that do? That makes the difference exponential. That's what God does. Right? This is a fantastic verse as you think on it and study on it, what we're talking about here. All right? Now, if you're an millennial, this is a great verse, right? As the kingdom of Christ will grow and cover the whole earth. And I like some of them guys. We sing one of their songs. Anybody know it? And the darkness shall turn to dawning, and the dawning to noonday bright, and Christ's great kingdom will come to. That's all millennial. That believes Christianity will cover the whole earth, and when we conquer the whole earth by Christians, and it'll get so nice and clean that Jesus will come back. Now, we're dispensational. We know that's wrong. And we see the Bible by truth. There's going to be a great failure at the end. Jesus is going to come back. But they believe they're going to win. Right? How many of you believe if you went soul winning, you're going to win somebody to Christ? You don't. That's why you don't do it. Right? We believe we're going to fail. That's the problem with us dispensationalists. Right? Most churches, and ours probably included, are thrown in the towel. The world doesn't want to hear it. The world doesn't want to get saved. We're just going to hold on till the end because Jesus is coming. And it's not true. They'll wax weaker and weaker if we wax stronger and stronger. God is in the victory business. We can still have victory. Amen? Well, the great falling away is here. How do you know? Tell me the day and the hour so that way I know. I was just talking to another church that since COVID, they've exploded. It's not the end. All right? The end is near. It may be, right? Right? Occupy till I come, Jesus says. So, listen, we can win. There's great victory in the Christian life, all right? And keep praying, keep talking, keep witnessing, keep going out. Don't stop, right? Man, I tell you, the last thing I want to do is stop in my last 10 years. To have Jesus said, you did run well. Who did hinder you that you don't obey the truth? Could you imagine hearing that at your day of judgment? You did do good. But at 52, you lost it. Who did hinder you? And I think, wow, that verse gets me. That verse gets me. Anyway, let's keep going. Verse number 2. It's making a huge difference is what I put there. All right? Now, bad things happen. We're going to look at 3 verses, one in Deuteronomy, 2 in Proverbs, 1 in Hosea. About what this section right here. It is not right for the king to multiply wives. But the king does. Now, we understand, especially today, if you've been paying attention to the Black Lives Matter movement and other movements similar to that, and they tear down the statues, and they're trying to say Christopher Columbus was wicked and this and that, and trying to get rid of these things, and Andrew Jackson and how evil he was. And the retort that's coming back against that is often, listen, you're judging them by today's standards. You can't do that. It's not fair. You got to go back to that world and understand that world to understand how great these men were. 100 years from now, they're going to, if they judge us by their standards then, you might not look all that great, right? So we got to understand culture. We got to understand timing and time frame and what the era was like. And that's one of the things that we understand here with David in the Middle East and harems and the stuff that happened with kings over there. And you know, it was difficult, all right? And the harem was a great way in which you made deals between other kings and you and brought peace to the land. It was also a symbol of how the power of the king was how big your harem was an indication of how majestic and how powerful you were. How many did Solomon have? 1,000, right? 1,000 in his whole harem. Why? What did that represent? How majestic and how great he was, the largest ever. And he's a picture of Jesus Christ during the millennial reign. And it was wrong. It's not right. God says not to do it. God says it's going to cause trouble. Look at the rest of David's life. How did it turn out for Solomon? How does it turn out for anybody that gets a couple, right? It's a problem. How come wives never get more than one husband? Are they just smarter than us guys? That's what it is, right? They're like, who'd want more than one? Good grief. And yeah. So what does David do? Look at verse number 2. And unto David were sons born in Hebron. Now, don't forget to tie this into context. He's getting stronger and stronger. Saul's sons just died, and the one son that's left here, there's more than one son left, but the one that's here that's reigning, he doesn't talk about his harem or his kids or nothing coming out of this time period. But meanwhile, in Hebron, David here accepts the rule of one, doesn't demand or go to war with Israel. Israel goes to war with him. He defends himself, doesn't seek the throne over all 12. And what happens? Just like David always does, he allows God to work in his time. He doesn't seek to promotion. And God prospers him. And David now starts having sons, which is, of course, the great blessing. Why? It's guaranteeing his kingdom. So the people looking to their king, when he doesn't have any kids, what do they know? Civil war as soon as he dies. He has a son, the whole kingdom rejoices. But what if he dies? He has 4 sons, we're secure. Then the sons start fighting. And that happens that's going to happen to David. And unto David, so this is David getting stronger and stronger, were sons born in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon. Story of Amnon just come to your mind? Right. How does that work out? Of Ahinoam, the Jezreelitess. We don't hear much about her, where she came from, what she is, but it was his wife. And his second, Chileb, is how you say it. Chileb, I think is how you say it. Or it's Caleb. I forget in Hebrew the CH is different, but let's call him Chileb. Interesting enough, he's listed in another place by the name Daniel, which is kind of cool, because that's my name. And it's believed his name was changed later on, which is kind of cool. Of Abigail, the wife of Nabal. Remember the story? What's Nabal's name mean? Fool. You might want to remember that when David is lamenting for Abner, when he says Abner dieth as Nabal dieth. And it's actually the word that's translated fool, as a fool dieth. Then what do you have? And the third is Absalom. Remember his story? The son of, and how do you say her name? Is it Micaiah? Is it like Baal? Is it a long A? Micah? I don't know. But some believe that this is actually Michael, because later it talks about Absalom's younger brother, but it's from Hegeth, which is kind of weird. So we'll figure that out. I haven't figured out the genealogy perfectly yet. But she's the daughter of Tilmaiah, king of Geshur, which is in Assyria. It's an Assyrian king, city king, and David married his daughter. Why? That looks like a politically arranged marriage. And the fourth, I said it perfectly, Adonijah. I said it perfectly all this when I was reading it in my head. The son of Hegeth. So what do you see here? Anybody remember his story? He's going to try to be a rival king to Solomon, and he's going to rise himself up against the king of Solomon. And David's going to have to put him in his place. And then what happens later, right? Oh, he tries to do something sneaky, and Solomon has to kill him. Yeah, he makes a claim to the throne, but does it backhanded-wise through his mom. Oh, so how many of David's sons aren't going to make it through this? Are you keeping track? Are the stories coming to mind? Amnon, Absalom, Adonijah. And now we come to Shephatiah. Shephatiah? Sheva? Just kidding. Shephatiah, the son of Abital. We don't even hear about who these wives are, where they came from. And the sixth, Ithream, by Eglah, David's wife. Now, that's the only one that said David's wife, which kind of sets her aside, and you can study that out if you like. I listed these young boys in my Bible to put the first, and they're listing the list of the boys and some of the order they're in. And David's now prospering. How many sons does he have here? 6 sons born in Hebron in 7 years. And this is David prospering. Now, let's take a look at this. How many wives are listed here? You got to read your Bible carefully. You got to go down through the list now. How many wives are listed here? Still waiting. How many got 6? You got 7? Matthew got 7. So somebody else got 7. I have 6, but Matthew's recounting. He already counted a son as a wife. Mrs. Mills got 5. Because one's still called Nabal's wife, which is interesting. God never forgets that. Always calls her Nabal's wife. Right. So if you got these 6 wives, is this right or wrong? Deuteronomy 17:17. Just so y'all, I know y'all know this, but let's read it in our scriptures so that way we know it's true. Deuteronomy 17:17. The law of God. Talking about the king, the law of kings. Starts in Deuteronomy 17:14 and goes to the end of the chapter. We'll read Deuteronomy 17:17. Neither shall he, speaking of any king of Israel, multiply wives to himself. Then God tells you why. That his heart turn not away. Neither shall he greatly multiply himself silver and gold. That's where our politicians go wrong. Either one turns the heart. So God's worried about the heart. And he says, multiple wives turn your heart. Interesting, isn't it? He says, one wife's okay. But multiple wives, it will turn away the heart. We know this happens to Solomon. This is what happens. Look at Proverbs 31:13. Every month you read Proverbs 31. Well, every other month. Or if you're a lady, you just skip it altogether. Proverbs 31. What did I say, verse 5? 6. Well, I like verse 5. Okay, verse 6. No, it's not verse 5. Did I say verse 6? 13. Did I say 13? 31:13. I was wondering which one I said. That's not what I said. That's not what I'm looking for. And 3. There it is. 31:3. Give not thy strength unto women. Proverbs 31:3. Give not your strength unto women, nor go the ways, nor thy ways to that which destroyeth kings. O King Lemuel. Give not your strength to women, nor thy ways to that which destroys kings. The tie in there. Listen, kings can't handle it, neither can you. Multiple women are not good. Multiple wives are not good. It is not the Lord's will, never has been, never will be. I'll make you go to another verse in Proverbs before I go to another. Proverbs 7:27. It's clear in our Bible. We know it's not right. So how do we handle it? How do we do this? We know that God can use sinners. Proverbs 7:27. Her house is the way to hell. Do you need any more? Who is this? It's the strange woman. What is the strange woman? It's any woman that's not yours. Any other one but the one wife you have is the way to hell. It's the way to hell. And when you see a woman, guys, that catches your eye, that's what I want you to think. She's the way to hell. Right? Fine-looking woman who caught your eye, guess what she is? She's the way to hell. That's what she is. She's the way to hell. God talks about the rest of your life will be a living hell. That's what it is. Right? That's what another woman is besides the one wife that God has for you. I want you to look at Hosea 4:11. Hosea 4:11. I realize Hosea was written long after David was alive. But this is a powerful verse. Hosea 4:11. I use it quite often for alcohol, but it's also talking about women. Not necessarily women. You could have a woman who's in whoredom also, and she's about guys. We try to get these young girls to stop talking about guys. Good grief, you're 12 years old. You know? Talking about boys all the time. It's stupid. Stupid. We never allowed it in our house. No one allowed it in the church. Talk about something righteous. I'm be talking about boys all the time. That's whoredom. It's a whoredom of the mind, allowing your mind to run. And No, control that thing. I'm glad you like boys if you're a girl. Praise the Lord. Now control it, right? Why? Because what's the Bible say? Whoredoms and wine and new wine take away the heart. It takes away your heart from the things of God. It does. I wonder why Jesus says no touching before marriage. Because he's worried about your heart, right? And the heart gets torn away, gets turned away. And I tell you what, God is concerned about the heart. And David's heart has problems. Okay, David's heart has problems. Why? Because he perverts the true and right way of God. He perverts the picture of what marriage is supposed to be between one man and one woman. How does it turn out? His oldest son rapes his daughter. His next oldest son murders his other son. His prime son, Solomon, ends up perverting sexually beyond anything you can imagine. And ends up making foreign gods all through Jerusalem and temples to him. Why? Perversion from the father to the son. This is just terrible. And it goes on to all of David's children. His house becomes a disaster. And you see one son's rivaling against another son because they have different moms. And one son's backing up his sister. Absalom's backing up his sister because they're from the same mom. Amnon's from a different mom. Doesn't even consider him a real brother. And you know homes like this, and it's a disaster. Well, why would you want to produce it? You know, they can come this way sometimes not on purpose, but this is on purpose, okay? It's not God's design. It's a serious problem. David pays the ultimate price for his perversion. Never think the number one sin that God mentions in the Bible, which is fornication, which is any deviant sexual behavior, will go through your family without effect. It will always have an effect. Always. Always. Keep your home as clean as you can keep your home. You put protection on every media source you've got. We get 160 channels, and I think all but 12 are blocked. Why? We're protecting our home. We're not stupid. We have boys and girls. We knew what they would be doing when mom and dad weren't looking. Right? And they still got away with a ton of things. We'll find out someday when they tell us. Right? Protection on every phone. Still do. And now they're carrying it on with their wives and stuff. Right? You still doing it? You and her still doing it? Those two do it. You got protection on your phone still? Yeah, protection on the phone. Still, Matt was sleeping, and but they're each other's accountability partner. Matthew and Bev are doing it, and they're Eli and Bev, not Matt and Bev. That'd be weird. But Eli's still, we're still his protection, right? But they're going to change to where now Bev will take the same accountability software, and she becomes the accountability partner. And she starts getting the emails. If anything on Eli's phone is anything with any kind of content, and I like our Androids because it also does our text, right? And most of our text, you know, it sends alerts for some things and we laugh at each other because usually it's because we said something to somebody to each other and then we get a warning about what we're saying to each other. And that's, you know, but that's great software. Why? I'm keeping my home as clean as I can. Some things I know I failed in, but I'm going to keep our home as clean as you can. It will never pass through without effect. And David pays a price. And every time I read this about David, I think about the price he paid. And I never forget that verse. When David sits there, I heard a preacher preaching, and David's crying out, Absalom, Absalom, my son Absalom, when he heard of his death. And the preacher said something along the lines of, David, if you could have kept yourself clean, if you could have kept it right, that day would never have happened. That day never would have came if you just could have kept it clean and kept it right. I so much would rather live without than live with regret. Oh boy, I tell you what, that's just good preaching. Anyway, verse 6. And it came to pass while there was war. Now God mentions it again. He comes back. The war doesn't go away, even though David's being blessed. Don't think the fight's going to go anywhere, right? The war between the house of Saul and the house of David, and Abner made himself strong for the house of Saul. This begins to give evidence of the true heart of Abner. It's difficult because of the praise that David gives to Abner, but there's also some reasons why David does it at the end of the chapter. Remember, the thing you can't forget about this is the arena is political. Why would David mourn for Abner publicly so predominantly? He leads the procession at the funeral when Abner gets killed. Why does David do this? Well, because the guy that killed Abner was Joab. Joab's for David. David's trying to unite a kingdom, and they just killed his leader by murder. How's that going to work to unite a kingdom? It's not. So what's David do? He runs the whole funeral, conducts the weeping, proves to all Israel, I had no part in this. And Abner was a good and fine man. He doesn't say righteous. He never goes beyond the truth, which is kind of interesting as you look into it. Don't forget the political arena you're in. All right? Don't forget that. There's war between the house of David. And Abner made himself strong, as Abner is wont to do. Abner wants to sit on the throne. If he had his way, he'd be king. He knows he shouldn't be king, so what's he want to do instead? What's just as good as being king? The guy controlling the king. And that's what Abner wants to be. He wants to be the guy behind the scenes that's controlling everything. Abner is ambitious. He's got a counterpart. His name's Joab. Joab's ambitious. Maybe not for the throne, but ambitious. And Joab doesn't mind killing. Murder doesn't bother him a bit. They're both tares. Joab and Abner are both tares. You've got to get this in your mind. Why does David put up with them? Why does Jesus put up with some? And when does he stop putting up with them? When does Jesus kill Joab? When he becomes Solomon. Don't worry, the tares aren't going into the millennial reign. Though they grab a hold of the horns of the altar, there'll be no mercy for them. Because that's where Joab dies, with his hands on the altar. And David tells Solomon, don't you let him live. So, and remember, they're both Jesus, so that's kind of cool, right? Verse 7, and Saul has a concubine. So Saul had concubines, but Saul's dead. So are his concubines free to remarry? Sure. As it would be in the law of Israel, their husband is now dead. But a concubine's different. It's more of a legal matter. So they're considered a wife, but they're not really a wife. They don't really have the status of a wife, but they're kind of a wife. Touch a guy's concubine and it's war. It's trouble. Touch a king's concubine and it's trying to get his throne. If you take a king's concubine, you are saying, I now have your throne. Now this is going to happen later. Anybody remember when it happens later? Absalom is going to take David's concubines out into the open on a rooftop. Why? To say officially, I have the throne. And this, so now if you understand what's about to happen, somebody is going to take a concubine of Saul's, which means what? They're going for the throne. This is a serious matter. Okay? How serious is this? A wife is going to come up to David one day and say, my son would like to marry so-and-so. Well, that so-and-so happens to be a concubine of somebody who used to be on the throne. That somebody's David's little brother. And David has him put to death. No, I'm sorry, Solomon. Solomon has him put to death. Why does Solomon have him put to death? Because he wants the concubine, which means what? I want a way to the throne. And Solomon sees through it. To take the concubine is about getting to the throne. It's about my claim to the throne. Now, we understand the politics that you're talking about dynasties of families. You've got to have a claim to the throne. You don't just take it unless you can have enough force to take it. But if I'm Saul's son, I got a claim to the throne. If I'm related to Saul, I get a claim to the throne. Right? Does David have a claim to Saul's throne? Yes. What's David's claim to Saul's throne? Michal. He married his daughter because he took out Goliath. But it wasn't enough. So then he had to get some foreskins of some Philistines. And they said, get 100. He got 2. So he ends up with Michelle, and then she's later taken from him and given to somebody else. Why does he want her back? Because he's trying to unite Israel. He needs a claim to the throne. So this chapter, you'll start to understand what happens in the chapter if you keep the political arena in mind. David's no dummy. If he's going to take Israel's throne, he needs a claim to that throne. Israel's ruled by Saul. Saul was the family chosen. Michelle gives him the right to that throne. He's the son-in-law of Saul. So now you start to see what's happening here. That's why when they said, when Abner tries to make a deal with David, he says, I will not see your face unless you bring back my wife, which he hasn't had for years, been married to another guy. Why does he want the wife back? Because David knows in the political arena he needs a claim to that throne. David's no dummy, all right? So there's a lot happening behind the scenes here, all right? And Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah. How come you don't find any girls named Rizpah today? I don't know. And I got to turn the page. The daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, wherefore hast thou gone into my father's concubine? So we don't know if this is true or not. We don't know if he actually does this or not. Does Abner take the concubine? Abner never claims he's innocent of it. Right? It fits Abner's character. He's slowly rising up. The verse before said he made himself strong for the house of Saul. Right? What in all is he doing? He's no dummy. He knows the house of Saul is getting weak. Right? He knows David's claim to the throne is through Michelle. He knows he's related to the family of Saul. What was he, again, uncle? The brother of Saul's father? If I remember right. So it was Uncle Abner. And so he's got a claim to the throne also. There's a throne up for grabs. How crazy does the country get when there's a presidency up for grabs? And that's only for 4 or 8 years. What if it's for life? The king is for life. Now, usually your life's short. But this is serious power. This is serious money. This is serious life. This is about politics. What's happening here? And now we go over to Saul's kingdom, which is, Ishbosheth. He's the king. And he says to Abner, his powerful general, remember, Ishbosheth's a puppet king. Abner's really in charge. Why are you trying to take my father's concubine? Or why did you take my father's concubine? Abner doesn't deny it. He just says, who do you think you are, exposing me like this? And that's what he comes back with. And but to understand why is Ishbosheth so worried about it? Because to take the concubines to aim for the throne. To take Saul's concubine is to say, I've got Saul's throne. And Ishbosheth's like, whoa, Abner. How strong are you trying to get here? Are you my right-hand man? Or do I got to start watching my back here? So you can see Ishbosheth's a little worried. Is this guy trying to take me out? And let's see. I have a bunch of things underlined. But we can look at them later, I guess. Then was Abner very wroth for the words of Ishbosheth, and said, am I a dog's head, which against Judah do show kindness this day to the house of Saul thy father, to his brethren and to his friends, and have not delivered thee into the hand of David, that thou chargest me this day with a fault concerning this woman? He never denies it. He says, who do you think you are doing this? I'm the one that's upholding the kingdom. Now remember, Abner is full of Abner. Right? And Abner views himself as holding everything in his hands. And he's the one who can make this happen. He's the go-to guy. He's the guy that can make everything happen. He holds all the cards. You need something, you come see me. How many of you ever met somebody like that? Right? This place will just go down without me. And that's Abner. Okay? Abner thinks the world pivots on him. He's the focal point. And he's the decider. And so when Abner's full of Abner, what happens to Abner? We got to ask a question. Why does God let him die? Abner's a mighty warrior. Very, very, very brilliant. We know it's subterfuge. He dies by murder. He's tricked by Joab. But we also know that the sovereign hand of God allows this to happen. Why does he let Joab live, who's a murderer? And he lives a lot more years. He lives the whole time that David reigns. David reigns 40 years total. Why does this Joab murderer live, but he lets this Abner die? And the testimony of David is, at the end of his life, that Joab killed a man more righteous than him. Didn't say he was a righteous man, but he's more righteous. He says Abner was a better man than Joab. You think Joab knows David thinks that? You think that's part of the murder? What if Abner and David do become friends? Who becomes David's new general? So what's about to take place down through here? We see that God starts working in enemies' camps. Now, this is what we never see. David's sitting on his throne. It's been 6 years. It doesn't look like anything's happening. Israel and him are still fighting. He knows they're getting weaker, but he's still one tribe. When's God going to come? It's a trial of faith for David, right? What David can't see is what God just told you. Guess what I'm doing in the other camp? The two big dogs are about to fight. The king and his right-hand man. The right-hand man who thinks he holds all the cards. Yeah, the king's now either going to falsely accuse him, or Abner is going to do something and get caught, or the king is going to bring it up when he shouldn't have brought it up publicly. We don't understand the setting and how it all happened. But we do know that you don't do this to a man publicly. Abner doesn't like it. So Abner comes back. Abner thinks he's God's assistant. Verse number 9. And so do God to Abner. So he gives this proclamation. You see this often. God do unto me if I don't do this. So do God to Abner, and more so, except as the Lord has sworn to David, even so I do to him, to translate the kingdom from the house of Saul, to set it upon the throne of David, over Israel and over Judah, from Dan to Beersheba. So now he threatens the king. The king's like, who are you? Why are you taking the Saul's concubine? What are you doing? Why have you taken her? And he turns around and says, how dare you bring this out and bring it up into the open? What am I, a dog? Am I worthless? Who do you think you are? I'm going to take this whole kingdom and I'm going to go give it to David. And that's what he's saying to the king. Now you're going to see his counterpart Joab when he walks up to King David and says, what have you done? Don't you know who he really is? You've been fooled. You're an idiot, is what he says to David. Joab's going to do the same thing to David here by the end of the chapter. And it's a phenomenal thing that these kings allowed this to happen, allowed these things to go on, and didn't just lash out and kill them. Ishbosheth is afraid, we're told, of Abner. Boy, time's flying. All right, let's get done here. And then verse number 11. And he could not answer Abner a word again because he feared him. So now you see where he's a puppet king. He's afraid of his general. And Abner sent messengers to David on behalf, saying, whose is the land anyway? I added the anyway, but whose is the land? Saying also, who may make a league with me? And behold, my hand shall be with thee, to bring all Israel unto thee. So notice, I'll be with you and I'll bring Israel to you. I'll make it happen, David. And he said, well, I will make a league with thee. But one thing I require of thee, that is that thou shalt not see my face, except thou first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, even when thou comest to see my face. So here's David saying, reestablish my claim to the throne, and then I'll know you're coming for me. Abner's turning coat, becoming a traitor, and going over to David. David says, you want this league with me? Okay. But your job will be to establish my throne by bringing back Michelle, my wife. So you understand? Otherwise, you'll read it and you're like, why does David put that in as a requirement? You know? And why would Abner be the one to go do it? And why? And apparently Abner can't, but Ishbosheth has to do it. I don't know if Abner makes him, tells him, or just without Abner he doesn't have enough backbone not to do it. But it says in verse number 14, and David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, deliver to me my wife Michal, which was espoused to me for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband. Could you imagine that day that they knocked on the door? I didn't go back and do the math. It seems like I've had it before, how long they were married. But it's been quite some time. Remember, it says that when David snuck out of the castle, and Michelle made a fake dummy of him in bed, and they came to kill David, the guards did, and she's like, oh, he's sick and he's in bed. She did that for like 3 days, and David escaped and ran away. Remember that story as you went through it? And then it says right after that, it says, then, and Saul, her father, gave her to, and this guy's name here, I can't remember, it begins with PH, gave his wife away. Now, you could add some time in there. It was probably a year. It was probably 6 months. It was probably something before Saul gave his daughter to somebody else. Could have been 2 years. But you're going way back to then. Now, David's been fleeing from Saul for well over a decade. Maybe we're talking here, maybe 15 years. How imagine being married 10 years and all of a sudden there's a knock at your door and the king's soldiers are standing there. He said, "We're here to take your wife." I would not rejoice. I'd say, "Your stuff's packed, man. It's already in the car." No. But, and then they just, there's no choice. It's life or death. If you stand to resist, they just kill you. You're not going to gain anything, and they take his wife. I mean, I just picture that. I'm like, man, it's just helpless. This is awful. This is politics, friends. This is politics. This is if you read the Middle East, it's no different than it is. It hasn't changed a whole lot. It's amazing. And it said, what's his name? Fatil? Something like that. Was that? Faulty? Is that how you say it? Faulty, if I remember right. I remember reading it before. I listened to sometimes some of the people that read the Bible, and then I always forget. Faulty, I think I'd remember that. Poor guy. But you know, if you take another guy's wife, he knew it when he took her. Somebody else has claim to her. It doesn't always end well. Yeah. I mean, when you start out that way, it's probably trouble. Don't be chasing some other guy's wife. Okay. Some other guy's got a wife, got a claim. I've seen it before where some couples going through a hard time and they just separate for some time and they need some peace and all of a sudden some guy sees her and man, he's after her. You know, get away from her. It's somebody else's wife. Well, yeah, but her and her husband aren't getting along. It's still her husband. Get away from her. Right? Why? Because it's not going to end well. It's not going to end well. This thing about marriage, God takes pretty serious. He likes to kill people over it. So don't mess with it, okay? Why? Because God has something in his Bible which he esteems more than all other things. You know what that is? It's called a covenant. When God makes a covenant, he holds it above all other things. God's covenants. And he calls a wife your covenant, the one of your covenant. I think it's in Malachi. She's of your covenant. God takes the marriage covenant, we call it that often, as one of it is the most serious thing in the Bible is God's covenants. And he calls marriage one of those covenants that God has ordained. God takes marriage seriously. He really does. And don't mess with other people's marriages, you know. And here, he should have looked and said, that's David's wife, Saul. I don't want her. You know, she's cute and all, but it's another man's wife. And I don't know the future. What if David comes back? What's Proverbs say about touching another man's wife? Man, God says you'll never be able to appease his anger or wrath against you. And a blot you'll get on your character forever. You know, does Faulty have it coming? I think that's a good name. I guess I never said Faulty. I like that. Right? Why? Because he took another guy's wife. Do you feel bad for the guy 10 years later they come back and take his wife away? Well, yeah. I still feel bad for the guy. I have some compassion, but because look what he does. In verse number 16, and her husband went with her along weeping behind her. I mean, he's brokenhearted. It's his wife of a decade, and he's just like, and he's walking behind as the guards are escorting his wife away, and you could see her turning back, and you know, right? Or is he losing his right to the throne, as my wife says? Is he upset because he's losing his you know? Does he have a claim to the throne now too? Was he in a political arena? These things are terrible that go on in these circles of these people, and this is just. And he goes up behind her, and he's weeping as they take her away. You know, it's just, I don't know. Isn't that weird? Then said Abner unto him, Go return. And he returned. Now you go home. Oh, all right. And I'm sure it wasn't quite like that. But it's time for you to go. You're done now. And the guy does. He goes back home and without his wife. And Abner had communications with the elders of Israel. Now, what I want you to look at is Abner's power here and his power play. He thinks he's the man. And in some ways, he is a powerful man. He contacts the elders of Israel saying, Ye sought for David in times past to be king over you. Now then do it. He says, You thought about David being your king once. Now let's do it. And they all are like, woo! They all rally behind him. Now, if we study this chapters, you're going to find the common man is prey to his leaders in such a horrible way. Let's go here, woo! And you're all like, yay! Let's go over here, yay! And some preacher comes in and says, oh, the King James Bible's old and archaic. Let's go to the NIV. And all God's people go, yay! Then they're like, hey, let's get rid of Sunday services. We're like, yay! Okay. Hey, let's try this new thing. Hey, we got this new youth leader. He's coming in. He'll really reach the teens. And he comes in. His face looks like he's been in a tackle box. And, hair is all standing up. And the next thing you know, let's move this so we have room for the drum set. And all God's people are, yay! I hope we're not that bad. I like to look at it and say, I'm not that prey to my leaders. But when I read this, God, the Israelites, it's like their leaders come in and the mass comes up and goes, yay! They're like, hello, can you see what's happening? But so often they don't. Then I look at America and people rallying behind their leaders and, fighting in the streets over, it just, and I don't know. I just... like in the last election, I know who I voted for, and I know why I voted, and I know what, but I wasn't really thrilled. If I accidentally hit the wrong button, I'd be like, oh, well. Oh, yeah, but, no, God's on the throne. The American throne will disappear quick enough. The nations are a drop in the bucket. So let's just read a little bit. We're done. We've got to read down to verse 21. Abner spake also to the ears of Benjamin, and Abner went also to speak to the ears of David in Hebron. So notice how many times it talks about him going and speaking. We're in verse 19. I'm sorry, I skipped to 19. We didn't finish 18. But the whole idea is you can notice Abner speaks, Abner speaks, Abner goes, Abner speaks. And you see Abner's this politician of politicians. And he knows who to go to. He knows what to say. He knows how to bring them. He's this dynamic leader that can bring things together. But in his mind, he's the power behind it all. And he loves the power. Right? And this is who Abner is. This is how Abner sees himself. And he is extremely capable, which is amazing. And verse 19, let's finish. And Abner also spake unto the ears of Benjamin, and Abner went also to speak in the ears of David and Hebron, all that seemed good to Israel, and all that seemed good to the whole house of Benjamin. So Abner came to David to Hebron, and 20 men with him. A whole different story. Last time he brought 12, and he put out the challenge to let the men fight. This time he comes with his men, but there's no fighting. They sit down. They have a celebration. David made Abner and the men that were with him a feast. And so here you see the principle of feeding the enemy and taking care of them as David sits down with them at the time to make these things happen. And Abner said unto David, I will arise and go, will gather all Israel to the Lord my king, and that they may make a league with thee. Now notice, I will arise and go and gather all Israel to the Lord my king, that they may make a league with thee, that thou mayest reign over all that thine heart desireth. Notice, he thinks David's heart's like his, that David's heart wants to reign over all. Remember, wicked men will always think you're just like them. They won't understand generosity, and they don't understand why you don't want to get even, and they don't understand why you're not trying to esteem to the highest position, and why you're not bad-mouthing the bosses, and they don't understand these kind of things. They think your heart's like theirs. And David, I'll go, and as you may reign over all your heart's desires, and I, your Abner, will make it happen. I'm trying to play up the Abner's part a little bit so you get the idea of who Abner is, okay? What Abner is behind the scenes here. And Abner said to David, I will arise and go, and I will gather others to the Lord my king, and make a league with thee, that thou mayest reign over all that thine heart desireth. And David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Now that's the key phrase there. And behold, the servants of David and Joab came from pursuing a troop, and they brought a great spoil with them. Woo, good times. But Abner was not with David at Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he was gone in peace. Notice God repeats himself, so that way, if you forgot in the last 35 seconds, you've got it again. But notice, God is not going to let Abner take credit for David sitting on the throne. Nobody gets credit for Christ sitting on his throne. God gets credit for who's on the throne. David will not let anybody else, God will not let anybody else say David is on the throne because of me. Remember, Abraham said, nobody will say, I've made Abraham rich. And he wouldn't touch anything from the king of Sodom. The king of Sodom is Abner, who is what? The seed of the serpent. We want to understand this is the picture that's being drawn here as you get that. So what's about to happen? I just want to show you the murder, so that way you go home with murder on your mind, because murder God wrote. And when Joab and all the hosts that were come with him were come, told Joab, saying, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he has sent him away, and he has gone in peace, third time. And Joab came to the king and said, what hast thou done, you moron? I added that. I think that's the voice behind it. Joab's pretty daring. Remember, Joab is family with David. Were they cousins, if I remember right? And behold, Abner came to thee. Why is it that thou hast sent him away? And he's quite gone. Thou knowest, Abner the son of Ner, that he came to deceive thee, and to know thy going out and thy coming in, and to know all that thou doest. David, you've been fooled. You've been played for a fool. You're an idiot. Why did you do this? What are you doing? He's talking to the king. Why doesn't David say, kill him? I don't know. Why does he put up with tears? And when Joab was come out from David, he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him again to the well of Sarah. You might want to jot that down, locate that position, and locate where he's killed, because it becomes an important spot. The blood of Abner laying on the ground. Remember, blood on the ground cries out. God talks about that. But David knew it not. And when Abner was returned from Hebron, Joab took him aside to the gate to speak to him quietly, and smote him under the fifth rib, that he died for the blood of Saul his brother. So he's avenging blood. And afterward, when David heard it, he said, I and my kingdom are guiltless before the Lord, forever the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. So he comes up to him. He says, let's have a meeting. Later we hear that Abishai is also involved, the other brother of Joab. He's like, come here, I want to talk to you privately. They go over privately, comes down on the rib, and he talks to him, and he puts the knife into him, and Abner falls there dead. It's at the gate, though. It's at the place of judgment, the place of commerce. It's a public place, but it's off to the side. And he does this in a public area. In defiance to what the king had just did. Joab is fearless in this area. He believes he's doing right for Israel, but he's warped in his thinking and his mind. He's a murderer. I don't want to go to the other verses right now, where God's going to talk about what happens because of this, and why Solomon puts Joab to death later because of this. He's going to do the same thing again with a guy named Amasa later. Joab's going to murder him too in cold blood. So this is cold-blooded murder. They plan to do this. But he says he killed him and avenged for his brother Saul. This is Hebron. It's a city of refuge. Now you're going to know the major spiritual problem that takes place right here. Joab is not defying David. He's defying God. This is a city of refuge. The avenger of blood cannot kill here. And Joab says, don't care what God thinks. We want to get the heart of who Joab is. Why? He's the king of Sodom. He's the seed of the serpent. He's a wicked man. He's not a good man. Vile. Vile. He's a terror that does not make it into the millennial reign. And David says, don't you let him live. in your kingdom. And Solomon says, okay, Dad, and takes him out. So, interesting stuff. Politics. Isn't it great? Don't you want to be a politician? And especially in the Middle East. I think your life expectancy is about 7 months over there. It's a brutal place. Nothing's changed. I'm glad you come to church tonight. Hope God can grab this and give you a few things as you study through what happens in the Middle East and what happened back in those days and how bloody and brutal it was. And after watching that thing last night, about 4 hours or 3 hours, whatever I watched on Islam, the rise of Islam. But we went through all the wars in the Middle East and all that was happening at that time. And it's just so bloody. So bloody. And then they had this forbidden place where they had to gather. And it was the rock city of Petra, they believe, where they gathered and they had these rocks set up. And nobody was allowed to kill each other in this whole area. It's this one area where it's like the free zone when you play tag, you know. If I get in the free zone, you can't tag me. And they had this free zone where nobody was allowed to kill each other, and they'd all come there to meet to talk. And they had to do stuff like that because nobody could get along without killing each other. And it's just Ishmael and Isaac are just fighting, and they'll keep fighting. And Esau and Jacob don't get along too good either. Who's Esau and Jacob? That's the Palestinians, by the way. That's Esau. And then you got the Ishmaelites, which are the Arabs. So if you follow their lineage, you can trace that down. Maybe someday we'll go through all that. The Table of Nations. That's kind of cool. Anyway, let's go home. Lord in heaven, thank you, God, for the truth tonight. We love your book. We love to learn about it. There's stuff here about Jesus it's so much more. And I pray the Spirit, as he ties our book together, someday as we're looking through the New Testament, as we're reading about Christ, something's going to come and something's going to pop. And we're going to remember a story. And Lord, you're going to put your word to word and spirit to spirit and spiritual to spiritual. And we're going to say, the beauty of the book. Bless now tonight, Lord, as we go home in peace. In Jesus' name, amen.